Next up, we've got Oregon, Texas Tech, another very intriguing game here. Oregon, 6.5, 7-point road favorites now in Lubbock, 67 the total in this game. This one's starting to creep into overreaction territory. And I know Texas Tech, bad loss, tough loss, whatever you want to call it, at Wyoming. But you know that's never an easy place to play. They had the lightning delay, so the game got going late. That didn't help things. But to me, and look, Oregon just scored at will against Portland State in their opener against that FCS squad. But I'd pump the brakes here. Oregon now on the road. It's travel from the Pacific Northwest down to Texas, where it's probably going to be hot, like it normally is at this time of year. And I believe it's a afternoon game, if I'm not. No, it's a night game, but still it's going to be pretty hot, 6 p.m. local time here in Lubbock. And I'm not totally souring on Texas Tech yet. And then there's that little, I don't want to make a big deal of it, the revenge factor and revenge angles in this, but Tyler Shuck's playing against his former team, and Tyler Shuck was initially with Oregon, and now here he is with Texas Tech, and you don't think he's going to be amped up to try to play a terrific football game here against this Ducks team? There's no question he will. Now, can Texas Tech, shut down or at least neutralize Bo Nix and the Oregon offense? That's going to be the big question. Now, again, last week, spectacular, and there's no question Oregon offensively is just a beast to deal with. There's no doubt, and we saw it last year. We see this year again. There's playmakers galore at their disposal on the offensive side of the football. When you talk about Bucky Irving at running back, you got Troy Franklin, Tez Johnson at wide receiver. Tons of weapons here. The O-line's pretty solid. The defense last year for Oregon, when we know this has been a team that at times defensively has had their struggles, but they definitely, showed improvement last year defensively, albeit, the final game of their regular season against Oregon State didn't go well. But now that defense is going to have to play a Texas Tech offense that I think can be dangerous, even though, like I said, didn't look great last week. But that Wyoming team, I don't think they get the credit. It doesn't matter, it seems, who they play. Wyoming at home, just their defense somehow just shows up, keeps the clamps down, keeps them into the game. This is definitely one where I'm not on board with the overreaction here a little bit toward Oregon and the overreaction of Texas Tech losing in overtime last week against Wyoming. Now, there's always that thought. You have a loss like that. Is it going to be a hangover for Texas Tech? No, you got to get back in the saddle here. You haven't even gotten into Big 12 conference play yet. There's still so much that you can at your disposal here the rest of the season. So I'm certainly leaning Texas Tech. I'm not willing to lay 7 on the road with Oregon, even with the possibility of how explosive and dynamic this offense for Oregon could be. What do you think here, Conor? Oregon, Texas Tech.
Yeah, the numbers starting to stretch out here. You mentioned it was. By Saturday, I wanted Wyoming. I couldn't get over the 2 touchdowns. It didn't matter, but because we talk about it, I was a little bit worried how Wyoming plays kind of early, first game of the year. That's the only thing that was going, because them at home at Laramie, I won my money on them because I didn't know how the offense would perform. And both defenses kind of gave it up, in that game. They were able. The big thing that I didn't love was Wyoming ran it all over Texas Tech. I mean, just they knew they were going to do that and just shoved it down their throat. So Oregon probably does that here, but now they're favorites, like you talked about. Not an easy place to play in Lubbock, and usually this is just a little bit overreaction. As soon as we catch points, Texas Tech at home, you mentioned Shuck, his former team. And Oregon on the flip side, Bo Nix, good old Bo Nix forever, 7th or whatever season going on. And Oregon has some great playmakers. I think it's a pretty good game. And I just don't know if I get involved betting it.
It is worth noting, I knew I wanted to go back and look this up, the numbers as an underdog here for Texas Tech. 11-point dog at Oklahoma State covered. Not a 10-point dog at TCU was a push. 3.5-point dog at Iowa State, they won. 1.5-point dog Oklahoma, they won. 4.5-point dog in the bowl game against Ole Miss, they won. I mean, that's historically, especially under Joey McGuire here, this current head coach for Texas Tech, been a pretty good underdog bet Texas Tech. So that's another thing that kind of I tick the check mark or tick the box on
Yeah.
Texas Tech in this game.
Those are great numbers you ripped off, and it's just different. I talk about like Pullman going to Laramie and your 2 touchdown favorites. Even though it's the first game of the year, you should be up for it. It's kind of a sleepy spot, and then to come back home now and catch points.
That was an exhausting game, and it was a very long night because there was the lightning delay. It went to overtime. It wasn't over until almost 1 a.m. Eastern time. That is that is definitely a concern I have, though, for Texas Tech is, it was a really, really long night. Can you get things back and ready to go your full practice week and have that energy be up at a high level for this matchup here against Oregon?